Welcome to Instant Discussions, episode 7, probably, where we will be discussing a liar's autobiography. My name is John.
I am Tony.
I'm Leif.
Special guest for this week, and Stefan cannot be here.
Rectal hemorrhages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens. So, Leif, you picked this film.
Yes. I'm a big fan of Monty Python. My dad at a very young age showed it to me. He showed Python.
Not this film.
Not this film from 2011, but it was on BBC America. It was, we had the movies, and I got to see it at an inappropriately young age. And it's,
I think a lot of kids are when the parents are fans of Monty Python, then the kids do get exposed at a young age. It can be like children's stuff, especially stuff like The Holy Grail.
Sure.
And even just some sketches, but they do very childish things, but they also do very adult things.
Well, what I love is everyone has the same memory of everyone who saw like Holy Grail at a young age. They have they either loved the Black Knight scene or they have horrifying nightmares from it. And the parents are always there. It's cartoon. It's basically cartoon, right? Like, no, his lips. And it's funny. I mean, you understand like now why it's funny, but you talk to people about it, and it's just like, God, there's blood spurting out of it, and they're just like kind of flippant about it at that point. I don't know. Anyway, so the reason I chose this, I saw that came up. I don't think it's a Netflix exclusive. I think it was by Epix.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's based on the life of Graham Chapman. The idea is that he, 3 years before he died, he decided he was going to record his autobiography.
Which is very fortunate for this.
That was good timing, yes. Otherwise we wouldn't have this. And so what happened was he recorded segments and voices and all of that, and he told his stories. And from what I understand, it was pretty incomplete. It's also based on a book called The Liar's Autobiography, Volume 6, which was published in, I believe, 1989, like right after his death.
Yeah, 1980 was the first publication.
Oh, was it 1980?
Yeah, republished in 1999 and 2011.
Yeah.
It was interesting when the movie's starting. I hadn't researched that it was taken from these audio books.
Right.
So it was the thing of, where do they get the audio for him narrating his own autobiography so long after his death? It either had to come from somewhere, or it was someone doing his voice,
Or a hologram like Tupac.
There you go. Yeah.
It's just like it was all Tupac hologram.
Yeah. Just
so you.
Well, going back to what he said, I never grew up with these movies. Like what you're saying with the Black Knight, I remember watching that for the first time in my church youth group at 16. Everybody had memorized every single line.
Sure.
They're all laughing, and I'm sitting going, "What?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to laugh now?" So I thought this was horrible. I was sitting through it, and I was like, "Oh," until the very end.
Okay.
That was the funniest part. Sure. I was busting out.
Are you talking about the eulogy?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Have you seen the entire eulogy?
Yeah. And
Okay.
well, I watched the on the film.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, there's a longer eulogy part of that, and that's a clip I had seen before, and it's a very good eulogy.
It's a great eulogy.
It's a Python-esque eulogy.
But I hate that parrot skit. so one of the guys at the First United Methodist, he's like, "You got to see this parrot thing." I'm like, "Okay." And they're showing the skit, and I was like, "This is not funny at all." And then they went on to SNL and did it.
Yeah.
And all they got was pity laughs. You could tell. It was like,
it is a different type of humor. Yeah, it doesn't play as much towards. It's not the broad American humor, but it is a popular British.
It's
humor.
very British. The kind I don't. I like one British type and not that type.
Okay.
I like the darker, messed up British humor.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but and a lot of that still you get. I mean, Monty Python's so prevalent, especially in England, that you get that the comedy is still gets that influence from them. It's touched by it. Not to say that every comedy after them is directly inspired by them, but you get they're all aware of it.
No, yeah.
So,
So one thing that I could appreciate is I could tell they were doing exactly what they wanted to do, because in other parts of that they're funny. Just them talking, them being interviewed, they're funny people. But what they were putting out wasn't my style at all.
It reminds me a lot of like Tim and Eric now. It's that idea. They're doing exactly what they want to do, and they're not really worrying about whether people are getting it.
Yeah, and nobody's in the middle with it. They're not like, oh yeah, it's okay. They're like,
oh definitely, yeah. There's
no
middle.
hate it. And, yeah,
and I think I had heard something from, it might have been an Eric Idle interview or one of the Pythons being interviewed, just saying that like things that they would do would get beyond the censors because they don't understand it, or they just so no one at the BBC would like touch their show because they didn't really get it, and also they were on at some crazy hour when they first aired, and it was just like putting them on in the middle of the night on a low ratings day. Don't really care about the show. And so that gave them that freedom. And part of that freedom leads it to, and I like a lot of this sensibility in Douglas Adams' novels, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the misinformation and misleading you. Douglas Adams will use that kind of an anti-simile almost, where compare something, it's like this is quite unlike this other thing, and using it, putting you in one direction, but then changing it completely, and it's not helpful to you at all. Any information, and that's kind of this idea here with A Liar's Autobiography.
See, I didn't like that. I was like, this is such a waste. Why do we go in this one direction? That had nothing to do with anything.
You're not even learning about his life as much because you're like, they're not telling me the truth. I'm not getting anything out of this. So it's like that entertainment from there. So it's really tough if you don't like Python. I guess if you're not into that sense of humor.
Yeah, if you're sort of an outside observer, it's you don't have. I mean, the idea.
Yeah, that's how I felt. Like it was a whole inside joke, and I wasn't getting it.
Absolutely no, and it absolutely is because they take they'll every so often they'll throw in a little sketch. Yeah. And they'll make a reference to a sketch, and if you haven't heard it, you're like, why are we talking about parrots now? And This is much. I mean, it's an autobiography supposedly, but it's also
a lot of it was true though, right? Because I read the Wikipedia part, and it seemed like it was based, like the main points in truth. Like,
yeah. Like they did meet in these places. He had gone here at this time, kind of.
And it talks about like when he was in LA, all the parties that he was going to. Those all really.
Oh, and he's name dropping those.
Yeah, I like that part. Yeah, and that. He actually had a lot of criticism for that for interviews where he'd be like, I was hanging out with Elton John and just just name dropping everybody, but also a lot of it is where it's like it almost could be true, like it's so fantastic that it could be true, like the story. One of the earlier stories is he's talking about as like basically a toddler, and his dad's working as a police officer, and he's going through and picking
up the arms,
and legs. What happened was there was like a bomber got shot down over his town, and so the police officers had to go through and pick up all the limbs, and it's so fantastic where it's like that might have happened.
Another thing too is if you look at it from watching a lot of Python stuff, when you they kind of take Python ideas and Python sketches, put them into a version of that into his history.
It's kind of like reverse engineering.
Yes. Okay. So then when you look at it that way, you think, oh, that could have been where he got the inspiration for this Bring Out Your Dead, where they have the wheelbarrow full of bodies. Parts, but then or even the Black Knight with cutting off the limbs. But then you realize, oh wait, he's looking back on this with all this information. He's putting these ideas and stories into his life. So it's the same type of thing where I was always taught in English classes, you can't analyze Greek plays with Freudian logic, because Freudian logic came from the Greek plays.
Right,
so you can't say, oh, Oedipus has an Oedipus complex. Well, of course he does. That's what it was named after.
Right.
It's that same type of thing where you look at this, and they do this kind of thing in California Adventure right now, where they're kind of trying to say, like, look, this place was inspired. This place could have inspired Walt Disney. And you're like, no. You base that off of something that was there.
Right.
But it's still that type of. They're creating another narrative where they're saying, well, theoretically, if this did happen, you could see how that could have influenced him.
Yeah.
So that type of thing where it says, okay, maybe think of if this did happen to him, then that could have inspired him.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
Could have.
I want to trying to find some positives in here. What did you think about the animation?
I love the animations.
Right.
I love the one thing that kept me in it was changing. The change of it.
Okay, yeah.
At one point, I know it looked like Parappa the Rapper, and I was like, this is so cool. The only one that got kind of weird was the kind of see-through.
Yeah, that was.
So it was kind of a little strain on the eyes for me, and I was like, okay, what's going on? But I loved just the change, and it was really.
I really like that, that kind of drug trip phase, or when he's going through. I wasn't sure if he was going through withdrawals. He was talking about alcoholism.
Yeah, that was.
Oh yeah.
That was when he was going to the parties and
it looked a little Fritz the Cat-ish at some points.
Okay, yeah. And what drove me crazy with that scene with the see-through, the transparency, was I understood why they were doing it. Like everything's supposed to be a little hazy for him at the time, but it took you out. Like that.
Yeah.
I didn't care for that. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think of an animated Python film, if it were a straight Python film, you'd think more of the Terry Gilliam style animation.
Sure.
But this really didn't have that at all. It had you get kind of that influence the animators get in there, but you don't really get that. They don't use like the found art manipulated.
Right, and I also like the fact that it was, it's basically all the animators that they got were fans of Monty Python. So I think they were the ones who threw in the little jokes, like the when they were in like Belize or whatever.
And they had
the Gumby hat.
Yeah,
and
I like with the fighter they had a picture of Hitler, but like a pinup girl.
Sexy
that was
Hitler,
fun.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this random stuff? That was good. Well, that's very cute.
Yeah, and his sexuality plays a big part in this.
That's one thing that confused me. So, if he associates himself as being gay,
right,
but then later on in life he's banging all these chicks,
right,
that's more bi, isn't it?
That's the thing he says, and
or was it fake? I don't know.
When he said he was going through the numbers and saying, counting up all the people that were attractive, and he got about 70% towards men, 30% towards women. So it's that kind of thing where and it's as much as we can take out of this as truth. Still, when he talks about the first woman that he was trying to sleep with just because social norms
for mother,
but just thinking about men while he's doing it, like the first woman he was sleeping with, he looked at her, he's like gross. But then later on, there was one that he found where he was perfectly fine for a while. So I think he's just got a narrower band of attractiveness towards women. So only certain women that he's attracted to, but he's attracted to a wider range of men.
But so it is 30-70 split. I mean,
it is bi, but he's saying he leans more towards gay, and that's why there are a lot of people still that don't always identify exactly one way when they're like, oh, it's kind of in the middle. We're like, if you're thinking like, okay, you're straight, but George Clooney?
Well, Brad Pitt. That's
Brad Pitt? Yeah, so you're like, even if
you're make a Brad Pitt, I don't care who you are.
You're like 99.9999.
But like my gay friends, when I talk to them about vagina, it's like they just saw a baby seal get clubbed.
And that's what he was kind of saying with when looking at the first girl's breast. He was saying that was just
my
gross.
gosh! And those pictures ruin boobs for me. Those are the freakiest boobs I've ever seen in my life.
Are you talking about
the boob clouds?
The boob clouds.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Do you ever see what was it? 40 Days and 40 Nights when the dude has the dream sequence?
No.
And it's just this billowing cloud of boobs, and it's just like this is upsetting.
It's. You're
don't ruin this
morphing them into this other thing.
Horrible.
And the penis coaster and the penis ship and there are a lot more penis images as well.
No, there's a lot. I mean, but they weren't freaky penises.
No,
the boobs were freaky.
Penises, but
the
boobs are kind of freaky. But that is another kind of Monty Python thing
That part did look, because I remember from all the openings.
Yeah.
And then it reminded me of the play that they were doing with Oscar Wilde. That was pretty Monty Python-ish.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that they did Wilde.
Yeah.
And that's cool. That's how the movie starts. You know. And ends. The idea is that the autobiography is he slipped, fell, knocked himself out, and he relives his entire life.
Yeah, and that gives reason for them to lie in it.
Right.
Because it's this kind of fantasy dream thing's happening in his head where he's remembering things, but it's also mixed with.
Yeah. And I tried to take notes on the different segments, and it starts off with Wild, and then the spaceship, and he throws up in the spaceship, and then it's all about Chapman's childhood, and I just kind of said, screw it.
Yeah. Yep.
And yeah, it's the pacing is really strange. It's it's not like you got 5 minutes, you got 5 minutes, you got 5 minutes. It's do this portion of his life, do this segment of the recording, and sometimes they overlap a little bit, which I thought was really fun, like the transition from one animation style to another. That was really I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I like when they do like in Mr. Show.
Oh yeah,
I like that kind of thing because when they do just a cut,
and that's kind of also like Monty Python's Flying Circus, where they did that as well, where one would almost lead into another one, and especially you see, I think the best example of that would have been Now for Something Completely Different, the sketch film that they had done, because even though they kind of do that in their narrative films as well, where it'll transition from this bit into that bit because it's transitioned with the narrative as the through line. But in Now for Something Completely Different, it's basically just their TV show but done as a film. But that one has it has these through lines, or this will connect into that, but they'll segue kind of smoothly, and then there'll also be recurring bits throughout there, or this thing will turn out to be connected to that. And so, like, Mr. Show gets it a lot from that, and I really like the way Mr. Show does it, especially they do the thing where a sketch never ends. There's never a closing bit where they do the curtain call, ta-da, until like the very end of the show.
Yeah, like Whitest Kids You Know, where it's like it's going to cut, and then there's machine gun noises, and then here's the next one.
Yeah. So one thing I do appreciate about Monty Python is I do see their influence in other people a lot.
Yeah.
So I like a lot of some of the the premise of stuff what they do.
Yeah. You like the concept of what they do. The theories behind it. It's just in practice the individual jokes that they're telling that just doesn't hit. And that works. That's,
I put down right at the beginning that 30 seconds of abuse. Oh god, I was like, is this supposed to be funny? They're just yelling stupid things. And then they go into the car when they're vacation and it's raining and their banter just like.
There was that interview that they had, that the Pythons had, where it was the last interview they all did together, except that Graham Chapman was in an urn.
Oh, the Life in Aspen?
Yeah.
That's funny.
And which the urn gets knocked over at some point.
Somebody comes up and hoovers it up.
So, because they're Monty Python, and they do this in everything that they do, there's never any reverence held towards each other. And so to hold reverence for someone in their death isn't true to the spirit of who they were. And that's why they have the 30 seconds of abuse. That's why they have the eulogy in the parrot sketch where he's dead. He's gone. Everything. They don't, there's no reverence held towards him in that. And, but by doing that, they're paying tribute to him.
Yeah, I know. I understand that. It's just
but it is weird.
What I always liked was it's always that it's nothing sacred. They're allowed to do whatever they want, but they always do it in good taste somehow.
Because they're British.
Well, yeah, exactly. But there's like at the eulogy, they are you see the cut to all the different pythons, and they're like, I think the only person who's really teared up is Terry Gilliam. But everyone's just like kind of waiting to see where he goes with this, and sure enough, it delivers.
That's another thing that I think it was an Eric Idle interview. And see, now Eric Idle, I hear him interviewed most about all this stuff, especially because he's promoting his new shows and doing that stuff. However, he's the only Python not involved in this film. The only one that doesn't contribute his voice to it.
Well, from what I understand, there was a bit of a falling out after Spamalot.
Yeah.
Because was it Terry Jones and Terry Gilliam both said that is the least Python thing we've ever done, and to put our name on it is going against 40 years of humor that we've put out there.
Yeah, because it's not the unexpected doing what you want type thing. This is like, okay, this was an extremely popular film, and now there's a musical version of it, which and so every night's doing the same show of that.
Yeah.
It's not the unexpected stuff. It's I can see where they wouldn't like that. But in Eric's talking about Python sensibility. Another thing that they had talked about was doing high intellectual topics, highbrow topics with lowbrow in a lowbrow way. So if they're talking about philosophy or science, like the Philosopher's Drinking Song, if they're talking about philosophers, that's a pretty high concept thing.
Right.
They have to do it as a bar drinking song, and that's the low concept thing.
Okay.
If they're talking about pooping or sex or any of that stuff, they elevate that, and then they do it in a high concept way. So it's mixing the two so that you never get everything they do seems smart and ridiculously childish at the same time, because you've mixed those two things. So instead of just going straight lowbrow or straight highbrow, and like they do straight highbrow, they lose the audience. Well, they do straight lowbrow, then people say, it's disgusting.
Well, that's why I understand, like, exposing a kid to Monty Python at a younger age, where it's like, you know what? Like, this is just silly. It's a live-action cartoon.
They'll get it on some level.
Yeah. And there are some things where you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
You know.
You don't understand that, but...
Yeah.
And then later you go back at it, and you're like, oh, that's what they were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one of the animations where it's a good 2 minutes long, where it's a statue of Dave, and it has a little fig leaf over the crotch, and you just see this hand from the other side of the screen come out, and it takes 2 minutes to do this, and then he just swats it out of the way, and the hand falls back.
Wait, that was in this?
No, it's a Python sketch.
I was going to say.
The Gilliam animation.
See, I would have died watching that.
Yeah, but
there's these bits in there.
Like which one was it? When he's wrestling himself? Yes. That went on way too long.
That was another Python sketch. More of the... I'd heard it in audio before. Had it ever been a film?
It's never. From what I understand, it was never in a show. It was never in a film. It was.
I've got it on. I think it's on one of the soundtracks.
It's on. It's like live at
their audio collection.
Right, and then they also did.
There was audio before.
Yeah, that was
even worse.
It was just the.
Oh my god!
Well, it's the idea of. Like, it's calling the announcement, the announcer calling it, something you can't really film as easily as someone wrestling himself.
Well, what happened was Monty Python toured. So the biggest, one of their famous ones is Live at the Hollywood Bowl in '78, I believe. And it's basically like, here's our segments. They don't transition like the show does. It's here's a bit, and I think that's when that clip came from. Colin Bomber Harris. And
so some of the stuff that they would do things like parrot sketch. They do things that people knew and get the laughs out of that. But then they'd also do things that you can't do as well filmed. So it'd be audio things, and that's where they'd also done Sit on My Face.
Sit on My Face, yeah.
Which they did a very long segment of that.
That too. I was like.
The one that cut in different formats, where it's like, now here's the disco version of Sit on My Face. All right.
Well, that's it. People like that, and then they build it up and do a thing. It's kind of building to the grandeur of the every sperm is sacred, from Meaning of Life.
Yeah. The film movie too. The only one I liked was Life of Brian.
Okay.
And that's because, I had gone to Christian school and read the Bible and all that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is funny. Oh, Brian.
Yeah.
Then that was the only one I liked. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that was.
I think they were working on they did the musical Not the Messiah. I haven't seen that yet.
Messiah. It's okay. Yeah. It's if you were sort of lukewarm on Spamalot, it's more of the same.
Yeah.
But.
One thing that I did like, my favorite scene was actually the coming out party. I hope that was better. That was real. Their reactions were like.
I'm sure even if that wasn't all at the same, event or at the same time, those reactions, I'm sure you'd get a lot of those.
Where he had to explain to the one dude.
Keith Moon.
Keith
Moon from The Who. He's like, all right.
That was good.
I don't know. The big theme, especially towards the end, was the sexuality was a good chunk of the movie, but also his alcoholism.
Oh yeah.
And he very famously during the filming of Holy Grail, he was not able to do a lot of his scenes because he was either drunk or he was suffering from dementia tremors.
Oh yeah, DTs.
Yeah, DTs. And so there's the scene where they have to cross the bridge, and that's not Graham Chapman because he got on the bridge. He's an acclaimed mountain climber, and he couldn't do this really simple rope bridge because he was shaking so much.
I mean, he was fit, right? He was a rugby player, they said?
A rugby player, a mountain climber.
Dude, rugby playing and mountain climbing is no joke. Like,
no, that's full body, yeah. And,
and they say, or I don't know if I read it, but I guess he was like always smoking too. He was always drinking and always had a pipe.
Right.
Just wonder if he died so young. I wonder how he died so young.
Huh. Yeah. But no, and there's all these stories about how he would almost kill his climbing crew, like as a joke. and he. That's
what I'm saying. That he's funny.
Yeah.
He's funny. It just
he is my favorite Python, only because he can do the ridiculous stuff and just look so serious with a pipe in his hand. And, But one of the things he did,
ironically, the straight man.
Yeah, right. No, he famously he dragged a toboggan up a snowy hill, and they're mountain climbing it, and he's like, no, we're gonna take this along. There was a mannequin inside, and he had attached a dildo to the crotch. The idea being that he was gonna slide it down and make this horrible crash, and somebody would stumble upon this.
The dildo would be not even attached up to the side.
Yeah, and things like that. I think what happened was he had these great ideas, and he's like, let's do this. Like these fantastic ideas. And
from the small parts that I saw him in interviews, he seems like a practical joker, and I love practical jokers. Like when he's being interviewed, I forgot where they were, but he said that he wasn't part of Monty Python; he was just an extra.
Right.
Yeah. So I think he's over there. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
That was, for Holy Grail.
He, I don't know. I like the straight routines about talking about how his parents were disappointed because they were expecting a heterosexual black Jew with several rather amusing birth deformities, and which is his nice way of saying where they weren't pleased that he was gay, but yeah.
And that's another thing. His parents, those were characters that seemed like Python characters, and then you see, so that's kind of the cyclical thing where he got inspiration from his parents to make these characters, but now these characters are based off of the sketches that they've taken them from. So
there is the his father, the police officer, is that's clearly what he based this military guy, the guy who interrupts the sketch is going to stop that. It's too silly.
Yeah.
That's clearly based on his father, and they show pictures of his dad, and it's like, wow, he nailed it. But
as he was playing those a lot. So
and two, I was wondering if how they say it's a liar, so you don't know it's true.
Right.
But his dad was just like, "Oh, you're gay? Oh, that's cool." See, I was wondering if that's true or not. That's cool if a military type dude can just be like,
Yeah.
But I just kind of wondered about that.
Yeah, you hope that it's true, but the chances are, but no, it was a different time.
Yeah.
But no, his parents were. Yeah, it was. You hope he's telling the stories, and you're kind of hoping that he's giving them a good representation or an accurate representation, and at the same time you're seeing all of his, I don't like spam characters coming out, and I don't know. This is definitely a movie for people who have seen everything Monty Python has done.
Yeah. Yes.
Another thing I actually liked was the New Zealand Bible part.
Yes.
I liked it because
that was one of my favorite parts.
Because it wasn't really that funny, but everything they were saying was like 100% true.
It was commentary.
Yeah. It was like, oh my gosh, that is exactly how I think,
Right.
So I like that little story part. Yeah. Although I didn't get why it had to do with New Zealand and Was that some reference?
Well, at the time he was touring a lot, so I imagine that he had spent some time in New Zealand, and that's what influenced him.
Yeah, and that's why they
was probably
decided
the
to
part
put that
that
in
just
there?
that set him over the most, or outraged him the most, that inspired him to do that.
Right.
But that's another thing. It's that kind of concept comes up in Python, especially like Life of Brian. That because they talk about the establishment and the flaws of the government, but they do a lot of talking about the flaws in religious practices that they see and the hypocrisies that they see in there. So that's one of the things in this there, and even why we referenced earlier, the "Every Sperm is Sacred" song from Life of Brian, which is the entire commentary of why they can't have Catholics can't use condoms, and flooding the streets with children, and he talks about that where God's like no, seriously, you should try not to have children unless you're fully capable of it, because seriously.
Well, it's always that idea of practice versus like tradition. That's what they always kind of point out. Well, why are we sacrificing a woman as a witch? And
they're evil,
and things like that.
This is the way you've always done it.
Yeah,
and this is it's been handed down from the ages, from these mountaintops, and this sacred book that we look at. And because it's always done this way, then this is how we have to live our lives and do this.
Change is bad.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
And that's getting that plus with this saying, "You guys are ridiculous. We're going to be over here doing our thing."
Yeah, and they for a long time didn't get any trouble for it, and then they did. There is a very, very good interview where it's a bishop and and like 2 or 3 of the pythons, and they're being interviewed, and the bishop's being very pleasant and asking them very scathing questions, but in a very polite British way, and they're like, "Well, we just had fun, This is why we were." We were raised in a certain way, and we sort of saw how silly it was, and then we all kind of laugh at the same things, and they go, "Well, we have thousands of years of tradition behind us," and they're like, "That's fine."
Yeah,
and it's never mean. I don't think it's ever mean.
No, it's not. They're trying to have a dialogue as well, and that's why this is the way that they present their views.
Yeah.
And so they're not saying that you can't have your views.
Right.
They're not saying that they're right and everything. They're pointing out in their own way, this is how we think you're ridiculous.
What I always love is the when they put on the costumes. I mean, like the Spanish Inquisition is one of their famous bits.
So of course that came in there.
Yeah.
Going back to church, people would just yell that out, and everybody would laugh.
Yeah.
You never would ever expect this, right? And I'm like,
See,
no one properly expects that there will be an Inquisition by Spanish conquistadors.
See, that's like, Python is one of those things that you can have ruined for you really easily. It's
the same thing. You get that modern day too, because I know movies like The Hangover or something where people are quoting it and saying all these things, and then I finally see it and I'm like, because and a lot of that has to do with them saying those lines over again, and they've repeated it, and it's kind of the thing of Andy Warhol had done, or even Shepard Fairey, that kind of repeating something until it becomes nonsense, until it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
So that happens, especially with the Python things, because so many people love it. If they're introduced at the right time, if you're played the Python stuff first without hearing all the stuff, then that can help it. But you also have to have the right sensibility for it as well. Just like any type of comedy, comedy is very personal.
Right. And I like it that it has a cult following, and I don't think we really have that many in this day and age.
Sure.
Like for me, I think I used to like the Evil Dead and and those types of movies. Yeah. So I like that, and I can appreciate that. It just didn't touch me the right way.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and because we're oversaturated. You can pick and choose from the kind of comedy that you want. You like Tim and Eric, you like Why Is Could You Know, Kids in the Hall, Mr. Show, whatever it is. You can find something, and at the same time, they really didn't have that when Python came out. They talked about the Frost Report. That comes up a lot in the movie, because that basically gave Graham Chapman and John Cleese their big break.
Yep.
But yeah, it
and that's one of the ones where you start seeing in there filmed into the animation,
right?
And whenever you see a film, that's all.
Is that the one where the kid's arm was shot?
Yes.
Yes.
Like, oh my gosh, that was not funny at all. It's like, yeah, where's the joke?
Yeah, to me it was like
the joke in there.
Yeah.
And comedy's always funnier when you explain it.
Explain it, yeah. Can you draw us a chart?
It's the minimal way in which they're talking about him being shot. It's the same kind of, it's a flesh wound thing, but it's they do that a lot in the military ones. It was in Meaning of Life, they had the tiger.
Right.
Well, even like with the parrot thing, it's like the same thing. It's like,
in the military aspect of it, and in the strict, rigid school thing, where it's just like they're very bureaucratic about it and go through the paperwork and not detaching emotion completely from it and that kind of thing.
Well, that's a regular thing. Like there's an old Python bit about a guy who walks into a doctor's office just gushing blood, and he got stabbed by the doctor's secretary, and the person's like taking his medical history, and it goes on for 5 minutes, and it's Michael Palin like flopping around on the floor just gushing blood. And and I mean I think it's sort of like it is a satire of the proper British reverence and respect for death, but at the same time it's a constant theme, and remaining upright and British and
yes,
so
it's going back to the point of when Python's around, there's not that much comedy out there. That's before SNL, before any of that stuff. And
no, I know. I mean, there was really nothing at all.
Yeah.
Like,
so
thinking back,
I mean, there had been stuff, and there were other comedy things, but there wasn't as much like this, and there weren't a ton of sketch comedy shows.
Sure.
Now, when you have a Comedy Central channel devoted to comedy, plus all of the other comedy that you get coming in, and even just having more media out there, more people producing television, like from England, America, and various other countries producing this stuff, you get more content, and now, especially with YouTube becoming prevalent, you have even wider comedy. So now it's even harder just to see one thing.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Like,
it's
when somebody showed me this big old long thing on Charlie Chaplin, I can understand why he was great, and I could appreciate it. And I know a lot of things came from him, but I just won't watch it.
We get to not only pick and choose because we're inundated with choice, but we also have the ability to go back and look at stuff because they didn't have.
At that time, you don't have DVRs, you don't have VCRs to record things. And that's another thing with the Chapman films and things like that. You had to go to the theater to see it, and some of those films would run in theaters for years. Even Star Wars ran for a long time there, right? Because you don't have home video, you don't have we're going to put it out now and then get it out on home video later.
Horrible.
This is just, you have to go to the theater to see it.
Well, I remember the first time I saw Monty Python and the Meaning of Life was in Sweden. We were visiting relatives, and they were catching up, and they kind of said, just like, put on a tape, Leif can go watch TV. And it was a recorded from TV version. And it didn't come on that frequently. Also, it wasn't readily available. You couldn't go down to the store and pick it up.
Yeah.
And I didn't, so it's kind of a big deal for them. That was, that's great. But yeah, it's not as readily available. It's not instantly watchable.
No, I'm sure that was awesome for you.
I didn't at the time. I didn't realize what that meant. It was, it's one of their more impenetrable movies. Like, if you have no idea what's going on, I remember feeling really awful after seeing Meaning of Life for the first time. Yeah, I mean, because just the topics and like
I did too, but for different reasons.
This is probably like 7 or 8. And you see Mr. Creosote explode after having the after dinner mint, and you don't understand why that's funny or why it's a commentary on
I don't think I saw that one until middle school. So
okay, so you have a little more context, and this was more like you see everything. You see the guy, his stomach explodes, and he's just a crater, and its organs are still pumping, and at 7 or 8, that was a little hard for me.
Yeah. I think I saw a list a while back in the LA Times. They had the most disturbing scenes from any film, and it was supposed to be for horror films. They're talking about films like Saw and Hostel. Number one on the list was Mr. Creosote.
Really? Wow. It's a little difficult to watch, but
it's just that kind of. I think the reason it makes the list is because so many people they had grown up with that, and for so long that had just been just ridiculous.
Sure.
And also because
was on there too,
all of the vomit in there as well. It's that explosion of vomit. Do you have other points on?
No, I don't have really. See, parrot sketch sucked.
I love these notes. Lame,
stupid, useless. Oh, because I thought
funny.
It's like
one thing that I didn't touch on is I wonder if him, drinking the gin and being that guy with the pipe was to compensate for him being gay.
Well, he talks about going to college. He bought his jacket, his clothing, and then he bought a pipe. Basically saying, well, for two reasons, it was sort of a defense mechanism of, well, I don't have to answer questions if I'm looking thoughtful smoking a pipe, but also he becomes the guy who smokes a pipe.
Yeah. So then he's not known as that poof.
Yeah.
He is now.
Well, he wasn't poofy in college, right?
Well, he was never really poofy.
No, not really.
He talks about that.
It's just that was the term.
He said he was bent, not poof.
Right, and I mean, it's funny. He had a partner. He had somebody he lived with for.
Oh, David.
David, yeah. He'd been with for 20 years, and nobody really questioned it. It was sort of. I mean, it's either you're in the know or hey, Graham Chapman's bringing his friend.
Yeah.
And he never swished. I mean, like the whole thing about he talks about. When he's having his going away party and he's trying to invite pythons and also trying to invite Elton John and Bowie and they're too busy being strange over here. He's not concerned about that because that doesn't interest him. That's not who he is. So
yeah, it's just a part of him that influences his life. It makes it directs his life in certain ways, but it's not his main identifier. And he didn't want it to be his main identifier, and so he's taken on these other affectations to make that his identifier.
And I love how he approaches it with such a scientific eye.
Yeah.
He does that. He just kind of stands at a train station.
Yeah, he was going on public transportation and watching and just numbering people in order of how he's preferencing them.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's curious about himself, and especially when you see yourself as different from someone else, and you want to, and you realize that everyone around you thinks differently than you do. You kind of look at that and say, "All right, I need to learn more about this. I need to study this because I'm not going to find this in a book somewhere."
Right.
So that's him. Yeah, him looking at it scientifically and studying it. That's
sure.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of outsider people will do that and study and think okay, how much. Where do I fall in society? Right. For many different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was I don't know, it was kind of there's this is based on a book. It's also based on recordings, and there's a follow-up. There's actually two follow-ups. The second one is called Graham Crackers, which is possibly the worst name for a biography.
I think it's funny.
Cross promotion.
Yeah. No, that's more secondhand. That's more interviews from the other pythons or people he was living with.
Oh, okay. Like the Hadith to the Quran. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's exact. Oh God. Yeah. We just lowered it a little bit. It's like the Harry Potter books and the Quidditch books that came afterwards. Yeah, it's exactly like the Quran. Here's a supplement. Yeah.
That's kind of funny though that they have a supplemental book to his biography.
Well, there's a third one as well. There's more stuff that I don't know that came out. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But it's all pretty much covered. I mean, the Graham Crackers is more about his practical jokes and what he would do and just again do the stand up and look proper with the pipe in his mouth and just watch complete chaos unfold. But he also has, I don't know, everyone has their favorite python, and he kind of got the.
Even me, even though I don't like him, I have my for Brian. That's the only one I like.
Python.
Yeah,
your
favorite
favorite
performer.
Oh well, I like the what's the main guy? The guy who does a lot of stuff now.
John Cleese.
Yeah, because I like the other stuff he does.
Sure.
Yeah,
he does a lot of.
He's one that really. Well, they all kind of spread off and had their own things done after that. I mean, Eric
I didn't
Idle's
realize
the
one
kind
of them was a
guy that ties
director
himself
for
most to that.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Oh, he
I was like, what?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Terry Gilliam, he was the American Python.
Yeah.
He's the animator.
He did a lot of directing and good stuff.
Yeah, so he did the animation stuff, and then he went on to do directing. He had done Jabberwocky, which he had filmed like on the same sets a lot from Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And, I think there's another film that they
Time Bandits.
Well,
Time Bandits was after Python.
But there's when I was watching Jabberwocky, there was something where it was filmed on the same sets as like Camelot or something. There was another
Beard?
maybe I don't know. But there was another film that they just used the same sets. Okay. But that one was Jabberwocky was kind of that. It had a lot of the same sensibility as well, without the comedy, but the same look and the same style as Holy Grail.
But
yeah,
was it John Cleese? Is that, what's his name?
He might have been. I think Michael Palin was in it.
Oh no, I'm saying that's the guy that I said that was my. I don't even know his name.
Oh yeah, John Cleese.
But he's a good actor though.
Yeah,
he's a really good actor.
He's
like
great.
everything that I've seen him in, like I believe, and I felt that he did a good job.
Well, you know, he's the equivalent of an attorney. He's a barrister. He has this quote about how if he hadn't done Monty Python, if he hadn't been a part of it, he would have gotten a very good job, a very nice house in the suburbs, and he would have killed himself at a young age. And it's
So he's escaped that boring life and not been able to do this. And but John Cleese was one that he always kind of was the first to get away from the Pythons, and he had left the series.
That's why the series stopped. Eventually.
Yeah,
it was
the last couple episodes they were without John Cleese. So and he's a huge part of it and a huge voice in that. So it definitely
he's like the Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, he is kind of the Justin Timberlake.
John Cleese is the Justin Timberlake of Python. The idea is that when they wrote, they would basically all write together. I mean, there were writing groups, and Chapman and Cleese would write together because they'd written together on the Frost Report, and but they work better as a team. And what I was thinking was this might be sacrilegious, but Chapman has sort of the John Lennon bit going where he died first, and he has a little more mystery about him, and a lot of stuff came out afterwards. Like he didn't release the recordings; they found the recordings, and that's what got them to make this.
That's a thing that happens with a lot of people that die young, or bands that split up early. Like, looking at Guns N' Roses, where like they only had a few albums together as a band, and had they gone further, it probably would have been that great. Even Firefly, where you look at that show and you're like, okay, people can love that show, but it never had the time to go bad. It didn't. If it had ran for 20 years, and like The Simpsons or something.
Imagine what you could have. You could have people doing. You could have 67-year-old men doing the parrot routine right now.
Even worse.
So it's some ways it's beneficial to his legacy that he passed on.
Absolute shame though. 48. Jeez.
Yeah, it's still young. Like it's with the drinking and the smoking and that.
In the year 1000,
that hurts it.
That's old.
Yeah.
It's true. He died at like 40 back then.
Yeah. Back in that day.
So
back
in that regard,
back in 1989.
Yeah. In that regard, he was a very rich
well.
life.
Yes.
He's still a huge bucket of win, though.
Yeah, no, he did it.
Oh God. And oh my God, he had
legacy.
Like it was a party 24/7 for that guy.
Yeah.
Like he died young because he had enough fun for like 3 lifetimes.
Well, and the thing is, like most of the Pythons didn't do drugs. Like they had their vices, and like he had smoking and drinking, the drinking to a fault, to a point where he had to. His doctor basically said, "Your liver doesn't work right now."
I think what also helps them, and you see this in some rock bands too. When you have one that's so extreme, the others can look at him and and look at it and say, "Okay, I'm not going to do that in my life." Or, it's a mirror to them if they do anything like that. it's kind of like, I think the first guitarist from Red Hot Chili Peppers, when he OD'd in
Sure.
the tour, all the other Chili Peppers at that moment, even though they would go down different paths, you can look at that moment and remember, I remember when my friend died because of this and wanted to do that.
Sure, sure.
So that could be he's the example for the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Just like John Lennon.
Yeah, just like John Lennon.
Because the Beatles stopped doing drugs after John Lennon.
Yeah, the Beatles all said, "Oh, look at that guy! I don't want to die like he did. So I better stop doing these drugs so that I don't."
Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, I gotta stop hanging out with people who really like Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really excited to take notes on this because I'd seen this movie before, and I sat down and watched it again last night, and I just screw it. I can't do it. It's. I mean, you can get portions of his life, but at the same time, he drops things, and you don't know if it's important. Like the New Zealand thing, I was kind of like, oh, cool. It's fun, and it's more fun to just sit and watch and enjoy it, but. You don't take
it's this kind of stream of consciousness flow that it goes through, and I think it's if you try to get importance out of it, he doesn't allow you to. Doesn't allow you to grab on anything, to kind of think of him in any high regard, to kind of idolize him.
He takes out the significant moments. Yeah.
So. Well, personally, I gave it a 1 star. There was a few good parts. I did like the animation that kept my interest, just the switching up and stuff.
Sure.
It makes me wish that they made a few more movies like that. Because even me not liking the content and stuff is still like, oh cool, change.
Right.
Yeah. And then they have the shaded cell. Okay, it's different. Cool. But overall, 1 star. Right
yeah.
now.
As much as I'm a Python fan, it recommended this to me at about a 3.5. And that's about where I'd like to put it, but Netflix won't let you do half stars. So it's kind of tough because it's like, I don't know if I put it as a 4-star because it's not something I'd rewatch as much. And even compared to other Python things, I'd rather watch a Python film with the Python sketches than watching this again. But 3 stars then feels a little low for it. So that's kind of tough. But I think 3.5 is
that's what I would say. And at the end, he asks, "Well, do you like watching animation? Do you like watching adult animation? Do you like watching biopics?" And it's like,
kind of like
it's kind of
but it's just putting that all together. It's kind of like I like this because I'm interested in the topic, but then you also get the cool animation for it. And like there's another film on there. There are many versions of Dante's Inferno, but there's one Dante's Inferno on Netflix that's the paper cutout one.
You recommended that to me.
All right,
that's great.
I've only seen the first half of it because
it is really difficult.
Yes, it's difficult to watch. The animation is beautiful. I love the animation on it, but that's the thing where the story of it and getting through.
It's in my queue right now.
I like Dante's Inferno, the story, but it's also that's a kind of tough one to do because the book's kind of straightforward and that, but. I like the material and I like the animation, but the way they go about it and the way they're telling the story is kind of tough to watch. So that's an unfortunate thing on there. So it can't just be like that. It's great animation. Like even with this, you like the animation on it, but the subject doesn't interest you, so that doesn't help. So that can be tough with the suggestions.
Yeah.
So next week's film. There were a bunch of films on my list that I wanted to get to watch, and been so busy, like barely even fit in time for this one. But luckily, there's a film that's on Instant Watch that I have seen twice now, and I'll watch it again before this one. It does go off of Netflix on July 1st this year, so I want to make sure we get it in there.
Okay.
I know Stefan's seen this one. He was almost going to pick it earlier. There are many films with this name as well on Netflix, so you got to find the 1997 version. Check that it's
Beetlejuice.
Yes, exactly. Beetle the Game. It's called The Game. Have you seen The Game?
The Game? Wait,
you're not a fan of The Game?
I love the. It's.
We don't want to spoil anything. Michael Douglas is in it, and Sean Penn. And it is.
I thought it was the one with the black dude. Well, I'm sure
the one with the black dude.
The one
with the black. It's not. He Got Game. She got game. It's the
No, I thought 50
game.
Cent. He has. Doesn't he have one called?
No,
There were
something like that.
There were a bunch of other ones that popped up as the game.
Okay, so Michael Douglas
look for-
97.
Yeah, look for Michael Douglas
The Game.
97, The Game.
David
And,
Fincher filmed it right after Fight Club.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So it's a David Fincher film. So
I love the book. I love Fight Club, the book and the movie.
yeah, so this is one
I love the
that
way it's filmed. So
I'm a big fan of Fincher. This was one that took me longer to see this one until I saw it on Instant Watch. So if you like his other films, you may like this. It's but it's an interesting concept film. There's a lot of them. So we will discuss The Game next week
with no black people in it.
with no. I don't remember.
I'm trying to think. I imagine there are black.
I imagine there
In the
are, but
background.
sometimes you don't know. And
Yeah, they're in the background.
There are
They're
certain
playing
films
basketball.
where every so often I'll start to think about the movie and then think, I'm going to start counting and seeing if I can find any in here.
Yeah.
Because you just realize all the extras they've hired are now that not a single black person.
All white guys.
That's
in
what
the middle of Los Angeles.
That's
Like,
what happened with Fight Club, where it's like it's such a high contrast movie, and they're in the house, and you're like, oh, there are like 3 black people.
Yeah. They fade in the background because of the lighting. So yes, we'll discuss that one next week. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, wherever you like to watch or listen to this. Leave comments, rate and review us. Let us know if there are movies you want us to talk about. And
Like Fight Club.
yeah, like Fight Club.
I'd love to talk about Fight
Send any
Club
comments on this.
for 15 hours.
Thank you all.
Okay, bye. Have a good time.
Bye.
Bye.